Well, good morning, afternoon, evening, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, Ready, Set, Run, where we're going to be talking about running tips and tricks and how to get started with running if you're new to it, or some options if you're already an existing runner. My name is Alicia, and I will be working on the back end to make sure that all of your technical needs are met throughout the session. All right, so I'm going to pass things over to Melanie Portal, our wonderful kinesiologist and exercise physiologist here at TELUS Healthcare Centers, who is going to take it away.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. All right, let's do this. First bug, it's not changing. There we go. All right, here we are. So I'm Melanie. Thank you all so much for making it today. So I'm a certified exercise physiologist, a kinesiologist, also a certified strength and conditioning specialist. And I've got my master's in kinesiology. So what that means is I like to do a little bit of everything. I love working with all types of populations, from special conditions to general population to more the performance athletic side. So I love the variety. What I really specialize in is the active rehabilitation and the exercise prescription and programming, as well as the assessments. So musculoskeletal assessments, postural assessments, and also goal setting and making sure that your goals and everything aligns to set you up for success. So my coaching approach is very much a hands-on. I've got lots of energy and I love to coach in a more workshop hands-on style. For me, that last line there's nothing more rewarding than seeing someone learn to connect with and trust their bodies again. That is very much why I do what I do, and I love it. I love seeing that learning process. I love seeing us learn to trust our bodies, because sometimes we've got injuries and things that have been frustrating, but there's so much that we can do, and my job is hopefully to show you what's possible. So a little bit about the TELUS Healthcare Centers. We are a national network of renowned medical professionals, and our goal is to identify health risks and to inspire positive lifestyle choices and to improve outcomes, patient outcomes. So we have 16 TELUS Healthcare Centers nationwide, and Copeman Healthcare, Medicis, and Horizon are now part of that family, which is very exciting. And on board, we've got kinesiologists like myself, exercise physiologists, personal trainers, nutritionists, dietitians, and we're all available to support you and your family. So do not hesitate to reach out if you've got questions beyond this webinar. We are here to support you. So today's topic, we're going to start with planning is caring. So having a plan. I don't want us to repeat the New Year's resolution fails that a lot of people experience and struggles, because it's really tough we know what we want, but sometimes it's hard to get there. So we're going to talk about how to create a foolproof plan. Then we're going to talk about how to pace yourself so you don't injure yourself and that you set yourself up for success. Running intensity, how to manage that, hydration, talking about injuries, gear, and other considerations. So we'll try to touch a little bit on everything, lots to cover. Again, if you've got questions and I missed it or I haven't had time to cover it, feel free to ask at the end there. So our 6 W's for planning, they are wait, what, why, when, where, and who. This is to help us guide that process of how do we get started, So that first one, wait. Consider if medical clearance is warranted. Might not be the most exciting step, but it is super, super important. So especially if this is your first time wanting to get into running, it's always good to check in with your medical professional. They have your medical history. They're aware of what has been going on, and if there's anything that you need to consider that maybe you haven't thought about. And especially if there's cardiac or respiratory issues suspected, or you already know or diagnosed with something, they'll have a really good idea of where's a good place to start, just to set you up for success and not run into any issues. Thirdly, if you're taking medication, there's some medication that can affect your heart rate, and you can have different effects during exercise. So it's very, very worth looking into again. If there's other chronic conditions like chronic pain, diabetes, there's a long list of things that have very specific recommendations and guidelines for these things. So it'd just be good for you to have that information to move forward. And any chronic or acute injuries or surgeries to your lower body. So when there's a mechanical issue, that can often we're not starting off on the right foot. So making sure either we've properly dealt with those or you're aware of what they are and how to pair that with your running program. And lastly, if you're pregnant, no 2 pregnancies are the same. Some women are able to run very late into their pregnancies, and some are not able to at all. So super worth checking into with your doctor, making sure you keep yourself and baby safe. So one question to ask yourself, am I setting myself up for success? I might say that a lot today. So the next one here is what. So what is your training goal? Being realistic. I invite you to actually do this exercise with me as we go. If you have a pen and paper beside you, write it down, because we're going to go through these steps, and then you can come back around to see if you're on the right track or if we need to tweak anything. So I want to give you some examples, like if maybe a goal is improving running mechanics. I want to be able to run more efficiently, more comfortably. I want it to feel better. Maybe I want to run my first 1 to 5 kilometers. I want to run pain-free after an injury, train for a marathon. I just want to feel stronger and more confident. Maybe increase cardiovascular health, have a consistent routine, and the list goes on and on and on. So take a moment and really think about, what is it that I want? What are those goals? If you have a couple, feel free to write those down. And if they're not about running and you're thinking, hey, right now maybe running is in a couple months, write down whatever other exercise goal you might have. This is applicable for that as well. So next one is, so what will we measure? So we know what we want to, what our goal is, but what will we measure of that goal? So the first example I had given is that if I want to improve on my training form, my technique, maybe I can do a video before I start, a month in, 2 months in, etc. And that would be a really good metric. So I know I'm improving. I know that it's working for me. If I want to run a 5K, maybe I have a log book or an app that I log everything into, so that way I know that there's a progress. So some of us are very numbers driven, very metrics driven. That can definitely help with motivation. And then there's sometimes different periods of time or different people, like myself, sometimes I don't like to log things. And I'm that last bullet point where it's nothing. Sometimes I just want to run because I want to feel good. I want to de-stress, and I don't want to have to worry about writing down my heart rate and my distance. So I'm just going to go for a run, and I might just put a check mark on my calendar. I did it. That's all that that matters at that point. It just really depends. So try to pair up my goal. What will I measure? What makes the most sense to me, and what is motivating to me? And if it's not motivating, if putting all that data in an app, it feels overwhelming and it'll maybe even stop you from going for a run, then don't do it to start. Get ready or get started, walk, run, and then you can maybe get to that point at a later point. So this one, the big one, the why. Why are you doing this? Why does this goal motivate you? So I really, this is the part where those New Year's resolution, it works initially and then it dies off because we haven't paired it with what is important to us. So here's a very, very short and small list of priorities and values that we may have in our lives. If you want an extensive list, you can look it up on the internet. There are hundreds of different, again, priorities and values that we can pick from. These are a couple. I'll just read through a couple of them. You know, it could be community, it could be mental health, maybe a career is really important to me, stress management, personal growth, relationships, parenting. So there's those endless things that are priorities in our lives and that really mean something to us. And the reason why I bring this up is because it has to, again, pair with that goal. So for example, I'll use myself an example, just a bit easier. I love a sense of community. I really enjoy the social aspect of things. So if one of my goals is is to meet up, say, with a friend outside and go for a walk. If I know I'm going to meet someone, I'm more likely to do that goal to actually achieve that thing. Or if I want to get into running, maybe joining a running group would be more appropriate for me versus just going running on my own. So pairing, again, those priorities and values with that goal. And another example, if you're a parent of several children, knowing that your time will be limited and your time will have to be structured a certain way, how is it feasible for my goal to fit within that and also conducive to that thing that I love dearly? So write that down. I really encourage you, pick your top 3 of this list, or if you think of any other ones. So top 3 priorities or values in your life right now. And again, we'll move forward. When will you do it? So if we minimize the amount of decisions that we need to make, we are more likely to succeed. If we wake up we tell ourselves, oh, I'm going to run at 5 a.m. in the morning, and we get up and we're tired and we have to make all these decisions, we're going right back to bed. And that is everybody across the board. So if we have an idea, plan of when we want to do it, either what day of the week, Mondays and Wednesdays, or what time of the day as well. I like mornings work for me, or evenings, whatever it is. Just set that in stone so you know this is the time or these are the days that I will be moving. And so it's more motivating to get out the door. So the best time to do it is when you'll actually do it. I often get asked, is it better to exercise in the morning, in the evening, at lunchtime? It doesn't matter, with a caveat, I like to not exercise 3 hours before bedtime to make sure sleep quality, enough food, as well as hydration. So that would be my one little tip there, not to exercise too close to bedtime. Having said that, otherwise, morning, evening, it's not a big deal. As long as you can do it, it fits in your schedule and you feel good afterwards and it doesn't affect the other things in your day. So where will you go? Another one of these points of making a decision so we don't have to worry about it later. You can still keep it open if you don't like making all the decisions. Have the decision of, you know, I like to go run at this park. I like to go to this trail. I know the space where I'm going to be walking and running. And you can have a pre-planned route, which you can get through other apps or just through trial and error and trying out what you like. But you can also just say, I'm just going to go to the track, and however many times I go around the track, or I'm going to go to the trails, whatever trails I end up going down, that's what I'm going to do. So you can still have that variety and that creativity and that openness with the plan of, I know where I'm going to drive to. So having that down, write that down. Where will I be exercising? It could be multiple places. That's perfect. And then the next one is that terrain. Also being aware that different terrains will impact your joints and muscles differently. So on pavement, it is known to be one of the most difficult and most tough ones on your joints. So if you're able to plan to have other sessions here and there that you vary it up, either on grass and gravel or on the track, all those things will go a long way to keep you running a bit longer and also add to that variety. Yeah, moving forward. So who will hold you accountable? So if you're like me, and I feel very accountable to other human beings, so I have a workout buddy, and I'm more inclined to go for a running group or something like that. That's something that, you know, would work for me. I'm not sure if that would work for you. See if that feels good. There's a lot of online platforms now with COVID, and coaches available to you. And then there's the tracking tool. So there's a lot of tracking tools that can feel overwhelming. Even myself looking them up, there are so many different options, but there are a lot of really good ones that are all slightly different to really cater to your needs. So running apps like Strava and Nike Run Club and Adidas Running App, those ones you can most of the time, if you have it in your pocket or in your hand, it will GPS track and tell you exactly how many kilometers, the elevation, and the speed, and all these metrics that could be interesting and could be useful to you. There's other apps that are more about finding different varieties of routes, so you can just look at what's around you and they'll suggest you routes depending on what you kind of run you want to do. And then there's some that are, a couch to 5K, it's called, where it works you through day 1 to running a 5K, all the steps. You know, today we're doing this many kilometers, today we're doing some stretching, and so it'll work you through that. There's different options depending on how much structure and support you would like. I just wanted to give you a little example here. Now, looking back through your own points that you've hopefully written down or at least have in your head, this one is again for myself, just to give you a bit of context and we can learn a bit about each other. So for me, weight, the first one, yes, I have clearance. What I have chosen in the next 4 months, I really want to do a 20-kilometer trail run. There are no races really happening at this moment, so this will be sort of I'm doing this on my own terms. And then my other goal to kind of pair that is to log training sessions. I'm not that person that's great at entering things in apps, but I want to get better at it because I think the more I can see that progress, the more encouraging it will be. So that's sort of my goal A and B. Then why, for me, what's really important is that health, that community aspect, and then also coming back from injury. So that I want to be able to perform again after having been injured. When? Tuesdays, Thursdays, Sundays, and I'll be doing strength and cardio, so strength and the running on those days. And then with one hike every 2 weeks, ideally every week, but I wanted to be more realistic and open for success. And then where, for me, it's the gym and the trails. And then who will keep me accountable? That will be my friend that I meet up with and exercise, and then that log book that I really want to do. So I would be very curious what you guys came up with, and I really encourage you to think about all those points. So let's address some common running myths. So the more often I run, the better I'll get. So this one is interesting because, of course, the more we practice something, the better we will get. But with the human body, it very much is more of a bell curve. It is not a linear curve or an exponential curve. We have a bell curve where the more we do, it gets better, and then we hit a point where that's perfect, and then there's that diminishing returns, point of diminishing returns. So things that can happen if we're overtraining, if we're doing too much, we're running every single day and not letting our body recover. We can have, of course, increased risk of injury, possible central nervous system fatigue, as well as mental fatigue, especially if you have busy lives, lots of things going on, that physical stress, emotional stress, mental stress, that all really adds up. So being mindful of that. It can decrease our performance and also just cause us to not recover enough. We might always feel sore or not have enough energy for those next sessions. So I really encourage you, and we'll go through some different ideas and points on how to find that zone of optimal performance, but it is a trial and error zone. This is something that everyone will have to try things out and see if it works. Am I progressing, but am I not too tired and exhausted? Perfect. I'm probably hitting that spot. If I'm not progressing or if I'm overtraining, you can feel that as well. So it's about playing with it and seeing what works for you. So here, for pacing yourself, so this is during training sessions. There's a couple of things that we can train or that we can change within our training sessions. We can increase distance, we can increase time, and then we can also increase the amount of sessions that or amount of times that we're running, say that week or that month, the volume. Those are three things we can play with. And you're welcome to pick just one of them. Ideally, we just focus on one. Say we want to focus on distance. 1 week we do 1 kilometer, next week we do 1.5 kilometer total, the week after that, and so on and so forth. We can increase like that. But the one thing to consider too, our experience level. So say if we're just starting off, we want to start slowly but surely. So between 2 to 3 times a week often is a really good place to start. We see this in strength training and cardiovascular training. Anything less than that 2 to 3 times a week, then our body, we're still going to get some benefits, but we're not going to, it's more of a maintenance kind of frequency. So we want to work our way up to doing a little bit more than that so the body really adapts and really gets more comfortable with what we're doing. If you're a seasoned runner and you've done this for a while, you'll probably know sort of where to start. 2 to 3 times is a really good place to start regardless, and then work your way up from there. Alternatively, you can always there's another method that's very, very effective, sometimes not as feasible with time, but it's smaller 10 to 20 minute little chunks, 4, 5, 6 times a week, but it's very much smaller, much shorter. So it's another way to also work at it. We also want to consider a goal. So if it's a performance goal, I want to run 10K in the next 6 months, then I know I have to work backwards. This is the day I want to run my 10K, and this is where I'm starting. Now, how am I going to properly progress in order to get there and feel comfortable that I can do 10 kilometers? So keeping that goal in mind as well. And if it's leisure goal and I just want to run, I want to feel good, I don't have to really worry about how many kilometers I want to run, then I just want to make sure that I'm still getting enough rest within that I'm still periodizing some rest in that. And what I mean by that is that chart there, that principle of progression and overload, every little hump is like a week. So we want to think about week 1, we start, at a start, let's say 1 kilometer. Week 2, we do 1.5 kilometer total. That's over total of all our training sessions. Week 3, we go up a little bit. Then usually we do in chunks of 1 month. After that, we want to come down a little bit. We want to bring down that volume. So either a little bit less distance or a little bit less time that we're running, or less frequency. So what are those 3 things that I mentioned initially? We bring that down a bit, and then we start working our way back up. So that way we know we're always progressing, because we have to keep pushing the body slightly in order to see those increases, but not continuously. We always have to come back down a little bit. So do not overestimate that recovery week, and that recovery week, you'll still get a lot of things out of that. So pacing yourself on the recovery side, so 2 different ways to for recovery: active recovery and a rest day. Active recovery is anything but that run, really, that brisk walk, a different activity altogether. A slow run if you're experienced. If you're just starting with running, even a slower run can still be a bit more stressful to the body, since it's just learning and probably needing that time to recover. So you can also do light strength training sessions. There's a lot of things you can do for that active recovery that will benefit you, but will also give your muscles and your body that time to recover. And then a rest day, you can also do that limited activity day, leisure activity, no deliberate training. This is where you can do those physio exercises that we always forget about, or stability in our stretching work. So that's a really good time to do it. The one little caveat to that I wanted to quickly throw in there is to not forget our Canadian guidelines. So 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity of aerobic physical activity per week is what's recommended. So if our training program is under this, then we might want to consider more of an active recovery, or to make sure that we're at least bumping it up to this that recommendation. And if it's well above that, then we can adjust accordingly. So not to forget about that. Myth number 2, running at a slower pace longer is better than running faster for a shorter period of time. So the reason this is a myth is because actually variety and varying your runs brings a lot of positives and is actually really, really important for performance, but also for the body. The body needs, again, those different stressors in order to progress and to get fitter and stronger. So important for performance, important for the cardiovascular functioning. It recruits different muscles as well. So as we run faster, we're getting more activation of the muscles. So we're actually getting more energy is used and stimulating more of the muscle for, again, better outcomes. And then it could also help with body composition goals, because there's that myth out there that if I run slow, long and slow, then I get more weight loss or I get more aerobic training. Those things are not true. All systems are working at once and in different kind of a different way, in different ways, but that variety overall will be much more beneficial for you in your running than not having it. So what that can look like, different ideas for varying your runs, tempo runs. So what that's a faster run essentially. What that can look like is instead of doing 1 5-kilometer run, that day you can do 3 to 5 1-kilometer runs, but a faster pace. So running just the 1 kilometer will be a lot easier. We can run it faster, then you can do it multiple times, or just that one time, but really practicing a bit more of that speed. We can do the long, slow runs. We can do interval training, so that rest, it can either be slow running to running faster or a walk to a run. There's many different ways to do interval training. Hill and incline training, super important to do that as well. That's a strength training of running. That's going to get our posterior, our glutes and hamstrings and our posterior muscles engaged and working and helping us get faster and stronger. Cross training, so that can either be a mix of strength training plus some running or a different activity, and then the walking. So my training suggestion to you is within that week and a half, 7 to 10 days, try at least 2 of those variations from above. So you're not always doing the exact same route, the exact same time, the exact same way. We're going to do a couple different things. So try to pick at least 2 of those, and that way you can ensure that you have variety. So a way to measure that running intensity is through a heart rate. So a lot of us have the other heart rate monitors. A lot of the watches now have that. Benefits to having that available to us is it is an objective measure of how our heart is doing, how fast it's pumping, what's going on. It's easier. There's a lot of training zones that are information out there that if you train at this zone, it means you're working this energy system. If you work at this zone, so it can help identify where we want to be working. Having said that, it's not always indicative or a subjective experience. So myself, I could be at 160 running, and then my friend beside me, who's an ultra marathon runner, can also be at 160, and she is cruising, able to talk, and I can barely talk. So that number doesn't correlate necessarily with that effort that we're putting, that we feel. So that's why this other scale, the RPE, rate of perceived exertion, I'm just gonna change slides so you can peek and see. This is what it looks like. One very light activity at the bottom there that is pretty much sitting, watching TV, not doing very much, to 10 max effort. I can't talk. This is the hardest exercise I've ever done. That's the scale we go based off of there. And the benefits of that is a better indicator. So with my friend there who's an ultra marathon runner, we're both at 160. I might be at 9 out of 10, and she might be at a 4 or 5 out of 10. So she knows that maybe for her training stimulus to get better, she might need to be a bit higher. So her heart rate will have to adjust accordingly. So that's where the heart rate might not always be the best indicator. But the downside, of course, is not as objective. I don't believe in the apps that I know of. Maybe you can log it somewhere, but it's not as common as heart rate. So my training tip to you is trying to pair the two. Try to understand and see, okay, when I'm at 60, I'm a 9 out of 10. But hey, in 3 weeks, now I'm at 160, but I actually feel more to the 7. So I'm really improving. I'm noticing that I'm getting better. I'm getting more fit, and I'm feeling more tolerant to this exercise. So that guy. Myth number 3. So drink as often as you can to make sure to stay hydrated. So I see this a lot. We have some races here where people join. You can walk, you can run, you can walk, run. It's very casual, open to everyone, but they have a water station at every kilometer. And unless you are running super, super, super hard or it's super, super hot, you don't need that much hydration. Of course, it is important, But we want, just like that bell curve in the body, we want to find that optimal zone. We don't want to give it too much water or not enough. So if we have too much water, we might decrease our performance. We have this water, big tank of water, we can feel it move around, slosh around, not enjoyable. Sometimes that can make us feel weak, get cramps or those stitches that we feel. So if we drink too much water too fast, we can get that. Disruption to running because of bathroom breaks. If you have to run or go to the bathroom a couple times while you're trying to run a race or even just a casual run, that's inconvenient. You might feel nauseous, and then it also can dilute the amount of the sodium and electrolytes in your body that it needs to keep going. So just being mindful of those things. It will also depend on your sweat rate. If you're someone who sweats very, very easily, then you might need to replenish that water a little bit more frequently. If you don't, then maybe not as often. The best ways, here's a couple tips of how to make sure that you're well hydrated. The best thing to do is before the exercise, before the race, or before you go for a run, make sure throughout the week that you have proper hydration. If your body has been properly hydrated, it won't need so much care the day before. Check the weather forecast. Is it going to be really hot? What's the weather conditions going to be like? That will affect things. Avoid super salty foods before your runs, before exercise in general. It's a really good rule of thumb. Having some salt is important. It's definitely important, just not too much. Monitoring the urine color, so lemonade color, so pale yellow. If it's completely clear, that probably means you might have to go to the bathroom in 20 minutes, and that might not be very comfortable and convenient when you're trying to run. So we want to be well hydrated, but not over the top. Good fruits and vegetable intake will make sure that you have a good hydration as well. And lastly, 30 minutes before your exercise, and this you have to play around with. I'm someone, I do not like to have too much water before I run. That makes me feel nauseous. So I'll probably have on the lower end of that, the 250 mils, 30 minutes before. But yeah, learn to play with that. And then while you're exercising, it's a shorter amount of time, not as intense. A couple gulps every 10, 15, 20 minutes was probably enough. And as you work harder and as you go for a longer period of time, you'll need to increase that as well. And those ones can be specific, and I definitely suggest getting help if you need more recommendations on that. And then afterwards, we want to replenish that those fluids, so 150 to 200 mils of fluid every 15 minutes after minutes of exercise. So however much you exercise, make sure that you're getting enough water at the end there. Myth number 4, running will wear down my body. So we hear this one a lot, and even sometimes I worry, but what's really, really interesting is pain during or after running is often a sign that something needs tweaking. Of course, there are the exceptions. If there are bone issues, if we've had breaks, if there are conditions where maybe running is contraindicated, there are other options that you can do that are actually really, really awesome, and we can maybe talk about that in the question section. Otherwise, yeah, the things to think about if you're feeling like you are scared about, oh, is this going to hurt my body, or you felt pain in the past with running, think about the following things. How is my running form? So our body mechanics are huge. If we're running along, are hunched forward and we're shuffling, our body is not in an optimal position to be set up for success for everything to work and support each other. So if I'm tall, if I'm strong, and I'm running in a much more sound way less chances to have those compressive forces on the joints in a way that can cause pain. Think about, do you have a well-balanced training plan? We talked about each week and each month, am I doing too much or not enough? Just making sure that there's a good balance there, enough recovery and enough stress on the body to get better. Being mindful of muscle weaknesses and excessive tightness or past injuries. So any excessive tightness, even a really tight hip, or really tight shoulders, things that are not moving well are all going to affect the mechanics. The tough part with running is it's mostly a whole body exercise. So if one part is really restricted, the rest will sort of have to shift around and possibly cause either pain or some issues down the road. Think about that nutrition. Am I eating the right things and enough just to really support that running? And is there enough time for my mind and body to recover? So training tip here to set yourself up for success, just definitely seek out help in any of those areas. If something stands out for you, like, oh, maybe my running form isn't the best, or, oh, I do have this nagging injury, let's get that checked out. And then how can I, again, pair that with my running program moving forward? Injuries. So these are common injuries that we often see. The shin splint, so pain in front of our shins there, Achilles tendinopathy, heel tenderness, hip and back tightness, foot soreness. The good news is that a lot of these things are preventable or fixable. having said that, the bad news is that you do have to put in the work. And that's part of mostly what I do, is try to convince you why you should do your homework, because it's worth it and it'll make running and most activities a lot more enjoyable. So these are the top 4 things I would say that you want to hone in on to see. Let me do a self-assessment, self-scan, or any of these things off, and how can I improve that in order to help my body. So having good ankle and hip range of motion is crucial. So if you are feeling restriction in either of those joints, a lot of that running comes, you need to have good movement in those joints. If there isn't, there are a lot of stretches and things out there to help improve that you can do before you run or after you run, or both. Having strong musculature around the knees and the hips, that will support our core, our pelvis, and everything below. So good posterior strength. Sometimes we'll see some runners, they don't have the best form. They might not have much of a glute or bum, where we need to make sure that we have just as much strength in the back posterior of our body as we do as our front, so that it's balanced. That keeps injuries away quite a bit. So posterior, anterior, and lateral as well. So the outside of our knees. So strong hip and core coordination, that's another thing. If our body moves in segments and not together, then that's, again, as we're running, it's an exercise that requires that full coordination. So there are ways to do core exercises that actually work on this coordination, which I will show you now. So I'm actually going to take you for a little spin around here, because I'm going to show you these exercises. So the first one, the world's greatest stretch. We're going to start with a stretch that's a really good one, a good warm up. Endurance bird dog, good for that full core coordination. And then the cook hip flip, really good to activate our posterior chain. And this is a really good one to kind of keep the back pain away. If any of these hurt, please do not do them. I will try and go through a couple different options. There you go. Awesome. Great. Much easier this way. So world's greatest stretch, I'm going to start with on a chair first, and then we'll work our way down to the ground. This first one here, hands on an elevated surface, one leg back, one leg in front. The goal of this one is to have our front leg bent, our back leg straight, pushed back. You should either feel a stretch here under the hamstring or in the hip on that other spot. I'll show you the other side here. And if that's pretty easy, I can come down on my elbows and really sink my hips down to get, again, that good stretch there. And I'm tucking my tailbone, squeezing the butt cheek here. And from there, I can reach the arms and get a good rotation, opening up my chest and getting my upper body warmed up. And I'll show you on the ground, hands on the ground, one leg back, one leg forward. And same thing here, that reach, follow, look where your hands are going as you do that. So that is one. The next one is that endurance bird dog. So you're gonna be on hands and feet, and you're gonna reach one arm up, one leg back, and you're just gonna hold that there for 10 seconds. What I'm doing, I'll show you on the side. That butt cheek here is nice and tight. I've got that activated. My arm is reaching forward, and I'm pushing the ground away from me. And I'm hold without caving my back. I don't wanna be wobbling all over the place. So really work on pulling the ribs in and hold. 10 seconds, other side, and we're actually hold. You can tuck your toe underneath there as you go to reach. That's going to help stabilize as well. So that's exercise number 2. Exercise number 3, the cook hip lift on your back. Heels digging into the ground, toes off the ground, bring one leg in, relaxing your upper body, and then you're going to push through that heel lift, bring the hips off the ground and slowly lower. This one, the hips do not come off the ground very much. So don't worry, don't be alarmed. What we're really trying to do is activate the glute one more time here. Okay, that's going to help set our hips in a neutral position. And that one I like to do. 10 is my favorite number when it comes to doing these things. So I like doing 10 of all of them. If you have specific questions about those, you can ask me afterwards, but those are sort of my top 3 go-to that has really helped in the past. Running gear. So just quickly talking about running shoes. This is super important to set your feet and everything up for success, is a good type of shoe. So good arch support is awesome. We want a shoe, we can do the shoe bend test. If you can bend the shoe in half easily, our foot does not bend that way. So it's not going to provide a good enough support. We want something a little bit more rigid than that. We want there to be a good quality sole. Is it firm or is it really foamy? So I really, for running, longer running, I don't like shoes that are very foamy. One, they kind of wear out quickly, and 2, their body does not like to run on foam. It likes something a bit more firm. So considering that when you're looking for the right shoe, it fits right. It's not too loose. It's not too bulky. Especially if they're really bulky, sometimes it increases your chances for falling and tripping, and it can be not enjoyable. And we want durable and quality brands. Ones that I personally like, I think everyone's foot is different and everyone has their favorite brands, but ASIC is always my top one. They're still making, I think, good quality shoes, good quality soles. Saucony and Segoy, I believe. I can never say that one. Those are the top three, I would say. Things like Nike and New Balance isn't too bad. Under Armour and other more of the streetwear, good-looking shoes. They're fine probably for more of a gym situation and lighter, smaller runs. But for those longer runs, again, you want to get a shoe that is durable and that your foot isn't wobbling in it all the time. Because some people will come and see me and their feet are wobbling. They say my balance is awful, and we take off their Nike Airs and they're fine. So just being mindful that your shoe can really impact the way that your body moves and feels as well. So getting some help in that sense, getting someone to evaluate your gait is super valuable. For clothes, so running gear, we want to think about layers, all the layers. So there's nothing more uncomfortable than being overheating and not being able to continue running. So we want to layer up something nice and light underneath. We can have a little bit of a like a sweater or a little windbreaker, and then having that, especially in Vancouver, that rain jacket, because you never know when it starts raining. So that way you can layer off, and these things are usually made quite light and very portable. Getting reflective gear on or strips on your clothing just to increase that visibility if you are running later at night or super early in the morning and it's still dark. Be cautious of short shorts. So that chafing, not comfortable. We want to make sure either we've got some spandex that can wick away the moisture and stop the chafing, or shorts that are long enough. We've got products like Lanacane and Body Glide that you can put on those areas that are most likely to chafe in between your legs or upper body if your shirt is rubbing along. Those are some really good products to try. For hydration, it's what works best for you. If you like carrying a water bottle, that can be quite annoying. You've got those water belts. You've even got the pack if you're going for much longer runs, depending on what's best. Before pre-COVID, would take the lazy route and would make sure I have water fountains on my route. But so making sure you've got that bottle of water, and then good quality socks that absorb the sweat. If they're cotton, they'll be fine for a little bit, for the first 30 minutes or so, and then as you sweat more and more, then that's when the chafing can come on. So making sure you got some good quality socks there. Safety consideration and alternatives, things that you might know, but just good reminders to not run in the dark alone, wear reflective gear, know your route and your surroundings, and then be careful of wildlife if trail running. That's a big one here in BC. Be mindful of that. Make sure that either you've got the gear that's needed, or you have a friend or someone that knows where you're at. The headphone ones is very big because they make them really good. So good that they cancel all night noise out. So just make sure that wherever you're running, you're still aware of your surroundings. I like to just run with one headphone so I can always hear what's going on around me. And then what if I'm not ready to start running? So I wanted to just leave on that note, because maybe not everyone can or might progress through different speeds. Cross training is always super lovely. So I want to give a little bit of a personal anecdote. Last year when I had another injury, I really wanted to get back into running, and the only way that really my body was okay with that was mostly doing my cardiovascular work on the elliptical, and then I would do 75% kind of in the gym elliptical, and then that 25% out in the trails and hike and do a bit of the running. And then by the time it was time to go for my race, my body was fine and it wasn't too much impact. I was still able to perform without doing all those kilometers through just traditional running. So there's always ways you can get there. There's the different types of cardio equipment, the Stairmaster, the treadmills, similar obviously to running, but a bit easier on the joints. That could be a good alternative. And not to neglect the physical rehab can help and really create wonders to get you on your feet and feeling good again. And is there any questions? Are there questions?
is great. We thank you so much, Mel. That was really awesome. There's so much information when it comes to starting running, and it can be super overwhelming. So I think it was a nice introduction for sure. So just before we get started with the questions, I'm going to let everybody know that if you do have to drop off, we will be sending out a copy of the recording, so you don't have to stick around. But if you do have questions that come to your mind and you do have to drop off, Mel, maybe if you can just hop over to the next slide. You can email Melanie directly, and she'll be able to get back to you with some more specifics for you. Okay, so I am going to start. Oh, yeah, there's loads of questions coming in. I'm going to start with a couple that we got towards the beginning of the webinar. So the first question is it normal for a first-time runner to only be running at a speed that's slightly faster than a brisk walk?
Yeah, absolutely. No, good question. Absolutely. So we got to start somewhere, and that's the thing. Just even if we can walk fast at that same speed, the fact that you are running that, you are developing muscles that are more specific to running and will help you as you get faster and faster and feel more comfortable with it. So the speed doesn't really matter at this point. It's building up the right musculature in that running pattern that will be important. So definitely keep doing what you're doing.
Awesome. Next question is, this individual is finding that they've plateaued with the amount of time they can spend jogging at one time. So for example, not being able to keep running past 10 minutes, it just becomes too painful or too physically exhausting. Do you have any tips for overcoming this plateau?
Yeah, probably going back to some of those points we've talked about that variation. So if we're running at 10 minutes now, pain starts to set in. One, let's question why is there the pain? So I'd really dig into that first. See, okay, either doctor or physio or somewhere, what is happening biomechanically? Is there maybe a weakness somewhere where my muscles and joints, there's not enough stability, there's not enough strength there in order to get me past that point? So maybe actually strength training comes into being a really important factor in that plateau. And then maybe that third thing, then it could be if I'm always just trying to run the same route, same time frame, then it is, let's switch it up. Let's try a different terrain. Can I run on something softer? Or if I do a bit of hill walks and just changing that stimulus up to, again, strengthen other muscles and patterns to then have it be more comfortable to hopefully run longer. So that's sort of the progression I would go in. Be curious, why is there the pain? Is there any tightness or weaknesses there that need to be dealt with? And then two, what was my two? Oh, yes. And then from there, kind of try variations in different terrains, as well as different running intensities and movements. And yeah, and if the pain persists, then really be asking for help. And then for me, it's because I had that injury, so I went and did elliptical for a little bit. So I varied the different cardiovascular functions in order to give my body the break that I needed. So maybe also your body does need a bit of a break. That's where further help would be awesome to figure that out.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and this kind of actually ties in, I think, to the next question a little bit, because I know for myself, even I'm a pretty avid runner, and I know that some days I'm like, yes, I can go forever, and then other days I'm like, nope, definitely can't. This is so hard. So I guess how do you know when to keep pushing on a day when something doesn't feel great, and then when to kind of rein it back in when you're that's the question.
The golden question, totally. I think there's a couple different things. So if you're just starting off with it, you want to constantly be creating positive experiences for your body. So if we're getting to a point where there's pain or we're getting exhausted over a couple of days in a row, then we really want to reel back a little bit and just change it up to, should I do more of a walk, run, or something different where I'm not feeling those same either pain or exhaustion? Because once we get our brain feeling that, then it's easy to associate with running and just not want to do it or be frustrating. So that would be one. If it's more of a performance thing where you've been running for a really long time, then that's more about, okay, am I properly spacing out my active and recovery, those mobility sessions? Is there enough of that in there? I think that kind of that line it's tough because there's so many different things that come into this. Often people will say, oh, it's just your training volume, but in reality, this is what I love doing, is that is what else is going on in my life? What other stresses? Did I have a big work thing due yesterday? Do I have 3 kids running around? What is going on in my life? Other things as well. So if I'm having a super stressful week, maybe taking that as your active rest week, where I'm just going to go for a walk with the kids. We're going to go to the park, and so switching it up that way is just to not neglect those other parts in our lives that often add on to that stress and to that overall body feeling maybe on the edge of doing too much. I'm not sure if that answered it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, at the end of the day, based on my own experience, it really does depend on the individual too. Like some people are it's totally unique to you as an individual. So that's why it's so important to really get in touch with somebody who can assess your unique needs for running and or exercise in general versus just trial and error on your own. That said, so that said, if somebody just cannot do running full stop because they're experiencing pain or anything like that, what's the best way to get to a similar experience and the benefits of running without the impact?
Yeah, from a very, I guess, biased perspective, is that for me, I've always found the elliptical to be that thing, because you're doing that similar movement pattern, but it is very, your joints are not getting the same kind of impact. And what I like doing with the elliptical as well, to more mimic that running, is I just have my fingers, my little pinkies, holding on to something where I'm not actually using the arms for it. And so I really have to strengthen my legs. So I get to focus on my legs and get that core and hip strength. And I find that over time has progressed into more to pain-free running. So, but I think the elliptical is a really, really good one. Just walking on incline on a treadmill is also, you get really good cardiovascular benefits from that, if that's something that you're able to do. The Stairmaster and things like that as well. So as soon as you involve an incline or stairs, or your body has to go through more of those motions, if that's comfortable, then you're absolutely going to get really good benefits out of cardiovascular benefits out of that, and strength as well. So, but elliptical would be my number one if I had to pick one equipment at the gym. It's often overlooked. People will say the bike, and the bike is also really good as well, for sure. You're just not getting as much of the same movement patterns because you're sitting, because you're leaning forward. It is very isolated to more hips and below. But with the elliptical, you have to be standing tall. And now you're kind of the mechanics of it means that you're recruiting more your full body movement.
Yeah, that totally makes a lot of sense. So I guess on the note of the gym, what are your thoughts on running on a treadmill instead of running outside?
Good question. Yeah, I think it depends. It goes back to goals. If it stays because of pain, running on a treadmill feels better, absolutely, then I encourage you. There's nothing wrong. The running on the treadmill is great. For sure, the way that it's made, it kind of helps you. So it's harder to run on the ground versus on a treadmill. So it is helping you to some degree. But you're getting some really good cardiovascular benefits out of that. If you are going to want to do a race or something that is outdoors, you always want to mimic that environment at some point. So doing some training on the treadmill that's easier on the joints and might be good, but then making sure you're getting those kilometers or those hours or minutes outside to make sure that your body's used to that. Because also when we're running a course, there's things that pop up, and there's curves, and there's things that you have to adapt to. It sounds silly, but those can make the difference from being successful in a run or not. So yeah, so it's whatever feels best for the body. Always mimic what your goal is. If it is a race, make sure you are running outside as well, and otherwise the treadmill is a really good alternative.
No, that's great. So when you're finished with your run, I don't think we talked a little bit about pre-run stretching, but maybe less about post-run stretching. Would you recommend those same stretches, maybe with modifications, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think, well, those ones are, they're good for before. They can do them after as well. But some of the, I mean, I've got time, so I'll show you guys. How about that? Quads is going to be the number one biggest muscles here. Depending on if.
Could you stop sharing your screen so maybe we could see it. Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you. Our quads, these muscles right here. We want to make sure those are stretched. I'll show you just a very common one that you've probably seen. You can hold on to something, grab that foot. Make sure though that you are squeezing the bum and pulling the leg slightly back to get more of that stretch. People will often just hold it here, and you're not actually going to get much out of that. Squeeze the bum, pull back. Alternatively, you can come down to the ground and put your knee on the ground on something soft, toe tucked under, squeeze the bum, and then you can feel that stretch all the way down. So these are the muscles that get super overworked with training and might cause long-term either back pain or hip stiffness. So if you want to stretch those out, you can bring that arm across and hold it there. So that quad stretch with an extra little bit of that stretch through that lateral chain. Then we've got our glute, our pigeon stretch. This one we can do it standing up. I'll just show you here. Pants are not the most stretchy, sorry. Knees out, bum back slightly. You want to stick your butt out to get a good stretch on the inside here. We can hold that one. Or on the ground, it looks like you bring your leg on inside here. I'm over top and I let my hips drop down. This is a pigeon stretch here. So nice and tall, I can come forward and bring my elbows down. There. And also we can do the inner thigh. I'm going to give you 3 here. One leg out to the side. So we're going to stretch here, hands down to the ground. Back flat. We don't want to do this. This isn't doing that much. Back flat. So your tailbone is sticking up and out. And you're going to rock forward and back here. That's opening up the hip. That's stretching that inner thigh. You can also just hold it. You don't have to move actively into it. Make sure you get both sides there. You can also just do that one standing, which you might have seen this one before here, where you sit back on one side and then you get that inner thigh stretch. So those would be sort of my top 3 there. But yeah, stretching is super important, super important for the long distance running. If you're getting into it, you don't want to get too sore in the hips, or if everything gets tight, your hips sort of rotate forward, again, potentially causing back pain and other things. So you want to keep nice and supple in the hip area.
Great. And then when you are actually running, is there any particular form you should be mindful of when you're just starting out, or like should you be trying to kind of tweak and like running on your toes versus your heels, like that kind of thing, or is it kind of just whatever feels best to you as you're getting started and then change later?
Yeah, that one's really hard to answer globally because everyone's body definitely moves differently. I think first get a good pair of shoes and see how that feels, and then you want to go with what naturally feels good with your body. But then I think having someone have a look or filming yourself doing it, often we feel like we're doing something that we're nice and upright, but really we're actually hunched forward and shuffling. So maybe I find video feedback is really helpful for these kinds of things for yourself. Film it, look at what you're doing. You can even compare it to what you see online and see. But the biggest thing is, again, it is that upper body, keeping that open, and that you're really pushing off that toe as you're running to get that posterior engagement. I'm pointing down, no one can see, but more of that butt glute area. So yeah, hard one to answer. Good shoes first. Look at your own form and see how it looks. Am I relatively upright, slightly leaning forward? Is everything kind of, diagonal in a good stacked position? And then from there, if you're not sure, I think getting someone who's a bit more perhaps in tune with that technique to give you better feedback. Because some of these places, I know out here in Vancouver, we've got a place called Kinesiologist, and there's different companies that will sort of look at your, analyze your run and your gait, and then be able to give you recommendations on shoes and also give you an idea of what's happening there. So that would be a really good place for more objective measures of what you can do.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually just did the running gait analysis not that long ago, like 2 days ago, and it was so cool because they like showed me my running slowing down, and they're like, "Oh, your foot is doing this and that." So it's really quite interesting, but it's totally unique. Everybody's different, so that's why something like that, a full assessment, can be totally valuable.
Yeah.
So we only have a couple minutes left, so maybe I'll get you to share your screen one more time. I'll just put your email back up there in case anybody has some additional questions. So like we said, if your question wasn't answered today, feel free to email Melanie directly at melanie.portal@telus.com. And we encourage you to, if you do have any questions generally about the programs, the TELUS Healthcare Centers, or you wanted to get in touch with a kinesiologist here to help you get started on your approach to running, feel free to reach out through Melanie, or you can visit our website, telushealth.com/carecenters, and we can touch base with you directly. And so maybe we'll flip to the last slide. We just have one more final thought, which is thank you for attending today and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much.